Welcome to the Mystic Media channel. I'm your host, Rubina Rastaban, aka the Realist Astrologer, and I'm doing another astrological case study via Zoom conferencing. It's the platform that I use for my video readings as well as the classes that I teach. So let me share my screen, pull up this presentation. So this astrological case study is called The Evil That Twins Do, a case of matricide. Matricide meaning when you kill your own mother. So this is about Jarmecca Nikki Whitehead. She was a mother of twins. She was born on April 18, 1975. Birth time unknown. Here's Nikki Whitehead and her twin daughters when they were young. And a little background story. Tasmiyah and Jasmiyah were both honor roll students and Girl Scouts. The girls were initially raised by their great-grandmother, Della Frazier. Frazier said that Whitehead was a sporadic and random presence in her children's lives. In 2007, when the twins were 13, Whitehead requested custody of them. Whitehead and the twins clashed. Frazier said that the twins saw their mother's attempts to control them as hypocritical. Just a little aside on this. According to reports, Nikki Whitehead was basically a parent that lacked consistency. She was in and out of the home. Basically, the twins' great-grandmother, which is Nikki's grandmother, raised them primarily. And at a couple of times, Nikki Whitehead, she regained custody of her daughters. But there was times where Nikki and her daughters, they were all living with the grandmother, which is the twins' great-grandmother. And according to reports, Nikki's own mother was barely in her life when she was young. Nikki's mother was convicted of drug trafficking and I believe burglary as well. So Nikki's own mother had issues with motherhood, and Nikki was raised by her grandmother. So as you can see, there's a cycle with this dysfunctional family unit. So let me continue reading. The conflicts escalated to physical fights and resulted in counseling and juvenile court appearances. Frazier was given custody again, only to have Whitehead regain custody on January 5th, 2010. The girls protested the decision, but the court ordered a 2-week trial. I'm going to talk about why the court ordered the 2-week trial. It basically was like a trial run for Nikki having custody of her daughters, but I'm going to explain why they ordered that 2-week trial later on in this case study. Whitehead was murdered on January 13, 2010, so just 8 days after she regained custody. The twins said that they discovered their mother dead. The medical examiner called the murder a crime of passion and not likely to have been performed by a stranger. Whitehead's boyfriends were cleared after DNA. As you can see, it says boyfriends. Nikki had 2 boyfriends at the time of her murder. Evidence, including bite marks attributed to wounds inflicted by their mother during the fight, implicated the twins in the murder, and they were charged in May 2010. Both initially pleaded not guilty. So on the day of the murder, the way it went down was basically a fight ensued between Nikki and her twin daughters. The twin girls, they woke up late for school, and that prompted the fight. And then, according to the twins, the mother grabbed a pot, and I guess she was going to hit one of them. And then they talked about how a knife was involved. Next thing you know, the twins are stabbing the mother, and they stabbed her to death. They dragged her to the bathroom, put her in a bathtub, and according to the court documents, the mother was still alive, and she was talking to her daughters, talking about, I hate you. And, you know, I guess she knew that that was the end of her life at that point, and she just wanted to get her last words in or whatever. But basically, the girls left their mother to die in the bathroom. They went to school. They went to the counselor's office first, got a late pass, was excused for being late. And then when they got back home, they were already expecting the cops to have found their mother or whatever, but they saw that their mother was still in the bathtub, dead. Nobody had found her. So that's when they decided to contact a police officer. and I believe one was driving through the area, and one of them waved the police officer down, and that's how the mother's body was found, and that's how the charges were filed against the two. Once they figured it out that the girl's alibis just wasn't adding up. So here's Jarmecca, Nikki Whitehead. Here's her natal chart. As you can see, she has a stellium in Aries. Her Mars is in Pisces. Venus is in Gemini. Her North Node is in Sagittarius. South Node in Gemini conjoined to Venus. Her Moon and Saturn are in Cancer. Pluto in Libra. Neptune in Sagittarius. Uranus in Scorpio. So I'm going to get into her chart a little bit. So this deals with Nikki Whitehead's identity / personality. She was born on the 18th. 18 is one of the more challenging birth numbers. It reinforces the energy of Aries. Basically, conflict exists between the spiritual and material values for 18. She has a life path number of 8 that produces a life that is subject to heavy karma, reinforces the materialistic nature of 18, also reinforces the theme of responsibility, which she basically shirked throughout her life. Her sun is in Aries and it's opposing Uranus. Uranus is at the 0 degree of Scorpio. That can produce someone that's very willful. It points to her being detached, also separated from her children. Detached in terms of, you could say, emotionally detached. But that sun opposition Uranus can produce an awakening, but this awakening will upset a delicate balance that's already been in place. So it's like waking a sleeping giant, which is exactly what happened with the twins when she regained custody. So this is one of the aspects that contributed to her murder. She also had Sun quincunx Pluto in Libra, custody, court case, issues with controlling her children. That's how that manifests. Her Sun is conjoined to the asteroid Phaethon, and that can deal with actions that lead to disastrous consequences and calamity through children, because the Sun represents your children. Her Moon is in Cancer and it's in square to Chiron in Aries. Chiron is conjoined to Ceres, and that deals with her relationship with her own mother, where her own mother wasn't in her life like that. And in terms of her personality, that deals with her lacking a nurturing instinct, issues with being a mother, and where she wants to be the exception to the rule. So where she wants to be in her children's life whenever she wants to, and then when she doesn't want to, basically she goes and does whatever she wants. Her Moon is in Cancer and it's in square to Sun in Aries. I don't know what time she was born, so I'm not sure how close that square is, but I believe it would definitely be rather close. So that could deal with conflict between your wants and your needs at the most general level. So the Moon is going to deal with your needs. The Sun deals with your wants. The Moon in Cancer deals with her need to be a mother. The Sun in Aries is about, hey, I want to do what I want to do when I want to do it. That's how Aries operates. So there's that conflict right there. Also, her Moon in Cancer is in square to Mercury in Aries. That deals with a conflict between her emotions and her rational mind. It can make her quite illogical in her decision making, and it can point to her being very self-absorbed. Her Mercury is in parallel to Persephone. That can deal with disappearing for a spell. It could also point to times in her life where she was either abandoned or she could have been placed in a foster home or what have you at a point, but she was placed to live with her grandmother at the time. So that could deal with that. Mars and Pisces square Venus and Gemini. That can make one rather uncooperative, selfish, user, manipulative. And with that Pisces, Gemini influence, those are mutable signs. And that could deal with somebody that, they're wishy-washy, or 1 minute they want one thing and then they'll switch up and then they want something else. And in the whole process, people are getting used and manipulated. Mars is in Pisces and it's in square to Neptune and Sagittarius. That's dealing with her lacking accountability, her being prone to escapism, addiction, doesn't want to face reality. And it can point to actions that lead to your own victimization, where you shoot your own self in the foot. And with that Pisces, combined with that Neptune, that's like compounding that Pisces energy, that self-undoing karma. Her Mars in Pisces is conjoined to the fixed star Deneb Adige, and that can produce strong will and a strong temper. Her Mars is conjoined to Apollo, and that can make her quite headstrong, stubborn, repeating the same mistakes over and over again. And this deals with her fighting for custody, even though she knew that, you know, she really wasn't fit to be a mother to those twins. And like, she tried to be a mother when it was too late. And basically she had to suffer the consequences. But she was very headstrong in trying to control her twins and trying to regain custody. Her Mars in Pisces is in quincunx to Pluto and Libra. That deals with the fight for custody and actions that led to revenge / murder at the hands of the twins. Her Saturn is at the 13th degree of Cancer. That could deal with karma where motherhood and family is concerned. And also that 13th degree is very telling because 13 is a number of death. And it can point to emotional detachment going on with the whole family in general, or where there's this disloyalty thing going on within the family. And that's exactly what was going on. So basically all of the mothers were at odds with each other. So Nikki was at odds with her own mother, and she was at odds with her grandmother, because there was certain times where the grandmother wouldn't allow Nikki to see her twins. So it was reported that there was a 2-year period where the grandmother had custody of the twins, and she didn't allow Nikki to see them at all. Also, Saturn in Cancer is in square to Jupiter in Aries. That could deal with shirking responsibility due to a desire for unfettered freedom. Saturn is conjoined to the fixed star Sirius. That can produce a lot of ambition and pride, and it can cause someone to desire fame in life. And she did want to be a clothing designer. She was a hairstylist, but her dream was to become a clothing designer to the stars. So that's where that Saturn conjoined to Sirius comes from. But it also can produce danger as a result of being reckless. Her Jupiter in Aries is opposed to Pluto in Libra, and they're both at the 7th degree. 7 is sorrow, it's loss, it's sacrifice, but it's also escapism. So that's her losing custody due to her free-willing nature, and it can also point to the court cases. This is the determining factor right here. Her South Node is at the 2nd degree of Gemini. Gemini is the sign of the twins, so there it is right there. Her giving birth to twins was part of her karma. Twins, dualism. North Node at the 2nd degree of Sagittarius deals with freedom, but also the singularity. So let me just break this down real quick about Gemini versus Sagittarius. And I'm going to get kind of religious on you just briefly, but just bear with me. Now, as I said, Gemini deals with the twins. Her South Node being in Gemini deals with past life tendencies that she needs to try to reduce in this lifetime. But it also deals with karmic debt that you need to pay back in this current lifetime. So those twins were definitely a part of her karmic debt. Her South Node is conjoined to Venus in Gemini, and that can deal with karmic debt to be paid via twin girls, because Venus deals with girls. So there it is right there. But back to what I was saying about this nodal axis of Gemini and Sagittarius. So when you have North Node in Sagittarius, basically you need to try to live a life where you are sticking by a code of ethics, or you're operating per strong morals or high morals. You're supposed to try to do the right thing. You're supposed to try to live a life that you can be proud of, or live a life of truth and integrity. But with that South Node in Gemini, you're coming from past lives where you were rather immoral, you didn't have a code of ethics, anything was rationalized, and where you were two-faced and you were prone to be shifty and to just switch up. So that deals with the issues right there, and the twins came as a result. Now, where I'm going to get religious is this whole dualism versus singularity, because Sagittarius is the sign of divinity. You could say it's the sign of God. It's also the sign of religion, but let's just stick with the God concept. So Sagittarius would be God. So that would be the singularity, the God force. Like, you know, basically we are all part of one source, and that would be that Sagittarius singularity. Now, Gemini deals with dualism, the opposites. So just think about the whole creation story where God created this earth and created everything that is on this earth, including humans. And as a result, we were subject to dualism or opposites, good versus evil, light versus dark, hot versus cold. That's dualism. That's the essence of Gemini. So basically, you could look at Sagittarius as God and Gemini as creation on earth. And the tarot card, the lovers in tarot, corresponds to Gemini, and the lovers card is basically a male and a female together, and it deals with opposites. It deals with having to make a decision. It could deal with right and wrong or whatever like that. So that's very apropos that tarot, in tarot, Gemini corresponds to the lovers card, because like I said, in that lovers card, that's like the creation story right there, because you could look at the male and female as Adam and Eve, who were supposedly the first humans. And because that whole dualism thing, they had to basically, they were tempted by the serpent and all of that stuff. So just look at that lunar nodal axis of Sagittarius and Gemini to deal with ethics and morals, as well as that whole singularity, which is the God force, versus dualism, which is life on earth. So with all that being said, basically, Nikki Whitehead was coming from past lives where she really didn't have morals. She didn't have a code of ethics, and she was supposed to get that in this current lifetime. So in this current lifetime, she was supposed to maybe try to find God, whether through some religion or spirituality, or try to establish some type of spiritual base, code of ethics. Now, her south node is opposed to Shiva, which is the god of destruction. So that can deal with your karmic debt, resulting in your own destruction, or you could look at it as basically you being stuck on your past life tendencies, resulting in your own destruction. The south node is in square to her Mars in Pisces. That exacerbates ego-fueled conflicts that can make her quite inconsistent, and drives stem from past life instincts or tendencies. Now, just think about how she's in Aries, and Mars rules Aries, but her Mars is in Pisces, and it's in square to the south node. So, again, like I said, that exacerbates those ego-fueled conflicts, because Aries is a very egocentric sign anyway. Now, with that Mars in Pisces, it was like she went about it in a passive-aggressive type of way. And a lot of people did say that she was a very sweet woman and she was very kind and all of that stuff. But with that south node square, Mars and Pisces, south node in Gemini, she was operating from two points of reference, or she had two modes of operation. Now here's Jasmiyah and Tasmiyah Whitehead. Jasmiyah has a distinguishing birthmark that is right by her nose. That's how you could tell the two apart. And this caption states that mom worried that her twin 16-year-olds Jasmiyah and Tasmiyah Whitehead would kill her someday. So that speaks of that Mars conjoined to Apollo. Also, Mars quincunx Pluto in Nikki Whitehead's chart, where, like I said, she was determined to have her way at all costs. And she was very stubborn and headstrong, and that led to her demise ultimately, because she knew what she was dealing with these twins. She knew that they were out of control, and she knew that they were very rebellious, and that they would try to resist her attempts to wield authority, because they were constantly getting into fights. While Nikki had custody of her twins, it was reported like the cops were called several times. They were constantly getting into arguments and things. But the clincher was the second time that Nikki was able to regain custody, she was living with her boyfriend at the time. So I believe the fact that there was a man in the picture, that actually brought out even more of their aggressive nature, the twins. So here's their chart. They have a stellium in Sagittarius consisting of the Sun, Mars, and North Node. They have a stellium in Scorpio. They are of the Neptunian generation. Neptunian is a term that I've coined to describe individuals that are born during the time when Neptune and Uranus were in conjunction in Capricorn, because what that does is produce individuals that have a special mission in life, but it can also produce individuals that have special challenges or special needs. So a lot of children that were born during this time period, between like 89 and 96, A lot of them were born with severe health conditions. A lot of them were born on the autism spectrum, and a lot of them were born with severe allergies, like food allergies and things like that. Now, I did a radio show on the Neptunian generation. So if you would like to check that out, just go to the Cosmic Council Radio Network. It's a blog talk radio show. And go to the on-demand episodes. And then you can just scroll down until you find the Neptunian generation. It's a really interesting episode. So here's Jasmiyah and Tasmiyah as teenagers. And here are some of the indicators of karmic debt via the twins. So basically, this is where I put the twins chart up against Nikki's chart. And this is basically their synastry. So what's very interesting is the south node of the twins is at the 2nd degree of Gemini, and the north node is at the 2nd degree of Sagittarius, the same as Nikki. So Nikki shared the same nodal axis with her daughters. They both had south node at, well, all three of them had south node at the 2nd degree of Gemini, north node at the 2nd degree of Sagittarius. So that right there is a strong indicator of karmic debt through your children, or through those twins in particular. Her son is conjoined to their son, is conjoined to Nikki's north node, and it opposes Nikki's south node. That's basically them wanting freedom at all costs. They feel like they're above the law, self-righteousness versus shifty, loose morals, and that twin mindset, like I said. So just taking their chart individually, like I said, with that lunar nodal axis, north node in Sagittarius, south node in Gemini, in reference to the twins in particular, that was them operating as twins with the south node in Gemini, but then they would operate as one single unit, the singularity, and that's where they would really be prone to wreak havoc upon the family, because they didn't just get into it with the mother, they got into it with the aunt. So they were just very rebellious. Anybody that tried to curb their freedom, they were coming for their neck. So that lunar nodal axis with Sagittarius north node, Gemini south node, that south node points to them being twins, and that deals with that past life tendency, can also deal with that family cycle. And then, but like I said, with that north node being conjoined to the sun, they operated as a singularity, which was very dangerous. So it was like Nikki Whitehead was given a double dose of karma. So whatever Nikki Whitehead did in a past life must have been very egregious for her to basically have to pay back this level of karmic debt. So again, like I said, with their sun being conjoined to that north node in Sagittarius, they operated as a singularity. They operated as one unit, and that exacerbated their aggressive tendencies. So we're talking about mutable signs with Gemini and Sagittarius. Mutable signs are prone to extreme acts of violence. So they also have Sun conjunct Mars in Sagittarius. Basically, they're the judge and jury as well as the executioner. That Mars component deals with the executioner part. And then that Sagittarius, Sun in Sagittarius alone, Sagittarius can act like their own judge and jury. And Sagittarius is one of the signs that can be prone to vigilante justice, taking matters in your own hands. They also had a Scorpio stellium consisting of Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, and Pluto that can produce intense feelings. It can cause them to go to extremes. It can produce psychotic episodes. It can produce a dark mind, vengeful behavior, plotting, manipulative, and it also points to the custody issues. A lot of times when you see strong Scorpio influence, like a Scorpio stellium or Scorpio rising, Scorpio moon, a lot of times there was some outside interference going on in the early part of the person's life. And that right there speaks to the great grandmother. Venus conjunct, and also the court case and all that. Venus conjoined to Pluto, that can produce intense hate, vindictiveness. Also, it can just make you prone to want to do wrong at times, make you tempted to just be on the dark side. Their Venus is in square to Saturn and Aquarius. That could deal with them resisting authority, being rebellious, unloving individuals, and also disloyal. Moon in Taurus opposing Scorpio stellium. Custody issues with mother, resenting mother, abuse, influence from others, that great grandmother's influence. And like I said, all three women were at odds with each other. Nikki didn't grow up with her mother. Her mother wasn't a stable, consistent influence. And it seemed like the great grandmother was using the twins as a pawn. Or, you know, the great grandmother was at odds with Nikki, but it could have been justified. You never know. Because according to Nikki's chart, Nikki wasn't that upstanding as an individual. So the great grandmother may have called herself protecting the twins from their mother's influence. They also have Moon square Saturn that can produce an unloving mother or a mother that lacks nurturing. Also, where there's a lack of attachment to a mother, there's no attachment. And it can also make people very unloving. That Moon square Saturn can make someone be prone to exploitation and to be an unloving individual. Their Jupiter is unaspected, which is very interesting with them being Sagittarius. Jupiter would be their ruling planet. Makes them very wanton with this unaspected Jupiter. Basically, again, it reinforces the freedom at all costs. It reinforces the theme of them being their own judge and jury. And with Jupiter being a Scorpio, it also is like, you know, I want freedom at all costs to the point where I'll kill somebody. Like that's basically that Jupiter and Scorpio to the extreme. Like I'm willing to kill somebody who tries to restrict my freedom. And they were born during a solar eclipse. And solar eclipses can produce unfortunate circumstances. So like I said, the twins' North Node was conjoined to Nikki's North Node in Sagittarius. The twins' Sun is conjoined to Nikki's North Node. Like I said, indication of karmic ties. The twins' North Node is in square to Nikki's Mars. That echoes Nikki's natal aspect, where she had Mars square South Node, North Node in her own natal chart. And whenever you see that, whenever you see in a synastry aspects that reflect or that echo the natal of the individuals, then you know that those aspects are going to be very significant. And what those aspects represent, they're going to play out to the extreme. And a lot of times it's going to play out in the most exaggerated way. So, you know, you might have problems on your own dealing with that aspect in your natal. But when you double up on it through a synastry, you're just asking for more trouble. In this case, Nikki didn't have any choice because these children, they're her children, and you don't have any choice of what type of children you're going to end up with. But this is indicators that this is basically her karmic debt. So also the twins' North Node opposes Nikki's Venus. That echoes her natal aspect. Twins Pluto in quincunx to Nikki's Sun. That echoes her natal aspect as well, except this aspect is even closer than Nikki's natal aspect, which again exacerbates this situation, and it basically exaggerates that manifestation of that aspect. So on the day of Nikki's murder, Nikki's progressed Sun was at the first degree of Gemini, and it was conjoined to her progressed South Node in Gemini. That's the reaping time in terms of the karmic debt. So when she was born, her Sun was in Aries, but then it progressed to Gemini. Progressed planets deal with emerging trends and major themes in your life. Basically, it deals with the charting of how your life progresses, which is why they call it progressed. So basically, this is showing that at that point in time, it was basically time for that the chickens to come home to roost, where her progressed Sun at the first degree of Gemini, and it was conjoined to the South Node at the first degree of Gemini. Like, you can't make this stuff up. Her progressed Sun was conjoined to the fixed star Merfak, which could deal with challenges and catastrophe. Her progressed Venus was conjoined to cannabis. One of the definitions of or meanings of cannabis can be violence. Nikki's progressed Moon was in Scorpio. That deals with the custody issues. Scorpio also deals with death, also revenge. Nikki's progressed Mars was at the first degree of Aries. So her Mars started off in Pisces at the time of her birth, but then it progressed to Aries. It was at the first degree of Aries at the time of her murder. So that progression from Pisces to Aries deals with a paradigm shift from being passive to aggressive. And that points to her fight for custody of her daughters. Also, her solar arc Chiron was in Taurus and was forming a semi-square to her Mars. Chiron can deal with wounds. So that can point to mortal wounds to the jugular vein. So she was stabbed about 80 times, but according to the coroner's report, there was 4 wounds in particular that led to her death. So she had 4 fatal wounds. 2 of the wounds were in the area of her neck, and that deals with that solar arc Chiron in Taurus. And it was actually that wound that was to the back of her neck. It nearly severed her spinal cord. That was the one that basically led to her ultimate demise, because according to reports, they said that she could have actually survived if it wasn't for that one wound right there to the neck. And even then, if they would have called 911, she might have been able to survive, they said, if the paramedics would have got to her in time. But they left her in a bathtub to die alone. But yeah, so they stabbed her in the jugular vein, which is in the neck region, and they stabbed her in the back of the neck, nearly severing the spinal cord. The transiting sun was in Capricorn. It was opposed to Nikki's moon. That could deal with the face-off with twins. Also, where the authorities come in, the authorities get involved and they notify the family and all that, because the moon can deal with the family. The transiting North Node was in Capricorn, forming a semi-square to Nikki's Mars. That brings karmic circumstances. The transiting Saturn was in Libra, and it was stationary. It had just turned retrograde about 6 minutes ago, per the time of this chart on her murder. And it formed a quincunx to Nikki's Mars. That basically is death at the hands of enemies because of the Libra influence. Libra can deal with enemies. And then it can also point to her karma, because Saturn is a planet of karma. Transiting North Node in Capricorn was opposed to Nikki's moon. That can deal with reaping karma, and also the subsequent investigation and the coroner examination. Transiting Pluto in Capricorn square Nikki's Pluto in Libra. So she was going through her Pluto square Pluto transit. So everybody's going to go through Pluto square Pluto transit at some point in their lives. She was going through it in her mid-30s. I've been through it, and let me tell you, it can produce some nasty circumstances. It will bring the haters out of the woodwork. It will bring conflicts, like some of the most nastiest conflicts. So that conflict actually resulted in her death. Now, it wasn't that transit was still rather far away. It was 3 degrees separating from her natal Pluto. So, but even that, with something like Pluto square Pluto, that's going to affect you, even though that aspect, that transit isn't exact, even though it's not exact, like where Pluto's in the same degree as the natal Pluto, it can still cause things to pop off. And that's why you got to look at the neighboring transits, the additional transits, especially dealing with personal planets, because that can trigger this Pluto square Pluto in Libra situation, which is exactly what happened. Now, transiting Mars was retrograde, and it was in square to the twins Mercury. That deals with the arguments and agitation. Basically, that whole time when she regained custody for those 8 days leading up to her murder, they were going through it, like constant battles. But they did say that things tended to die down like on the 12th. But the very next day, they killed her. Transiting North Node conjoined to the twins Uranus and Neptune. That deals with them headed for prison because the North Node hadn't been exact yet. It was approaching their Uranus and Neptune. Transiting Mars in Leo, square twins Moon in Taurus. That's the conflict with the mother and the fighting. Transiting Mars conjunct Dove. That right there, that fixed star, can lead to destructiveness. Like, that is a nasty fixed star right there. It can produce some tragic circumstances. It can produce acts of violence. Transiting Chiron and Neptune was conjoined to the twin Saturn in Aquarius. Again, that's another indicator of them being headed for prison. Transiting North Node semi-square twin Sun. That's them. That's the restrictions that were being placed upon them that they started to rebel against, and that's the subsequent dealing with the authorities. And again, like I said, Nikki had 4 fatal knife wounds. Two of the wounds were in her lungs. One in the left lung, one in the right lung. Gemini deals with the lungs, so that's the Gemini South Node influence. And as I said, going back, her progressed sun was at the first degree of Gemini, and it was conjoined to the progressed south node in Gemini, same degree, first degree. Whenever you see aspects where they're at the same degree, know that that energy is going to be very intense, and it's going to play out exactly the way it looks, or basically what can happen basically will happen when you have tight aspects like that. So again, like I said, 4 fatal knife wounds, 2 to the neck, 2 to the lungs, 1 in the left lung, 1 in the right lung. 1 for each twin, I guess. So here they are in prison. You know, they look much older now, but this is like, I think this was like a few years after they were locked up, when they were like 19 or whatever like that. So Jasmiyah, the day that Nikki regained custody of her twins, which was 8 days before her death, Jasmiyah said to her mother in the courtroom, "If I have to go live with you again, I'm going to kill you." Oh, and that's what I mean. Remember when I said that the judge basically was like, we're going to do a 2-week trial period? That was why they ordered the 2-week trial period, because even the court officials, they heard Jasmiyah say this to the mother, and instead of saying, look, we're going to have to cancel this ruling, they're going straight back to the great grandmother because they're putting the mother's life in danger, they instead said, well, no, we'll just give it a 2-week trial, and then you'll have to come back to court and we'll revisit this at that date. But as you can see, Jasmiyah was dead serious with her threat. Now, I pulled tarot cards for all 3 of them, which I love to do because I like to pull a card to show a person's core personality or their identity per tarot. So this is very telling. Now, the twin significator cards are the Ace of Wands, which is Taz, and the Hierophant, which is Jazz. And according to family members, Taz was the aggressive one, where Jazz was the more passive one. And it makes perfect sense. With Taz being represented by the Ace of Wands, that's fire energy, that's aggression. That's basically where you're the initiator, where you're the one taking action, or where you're like, you act as like the, you're like the, what do you call it? You're the fire. Now, Jazz is the Hierophant. She's like the fuel. She's the one putting the fuel on the fire. But you can also look at it as she is the conformance. So Taz with the Ace of Wands is the aggressor. She's the one that's more of the fighter. She's the one that is more about action. But Jazz is the one that's the conformance. That's the Hierophant. She's the one with the birthmark, which is very much Hierophant as well. But also, she was like the voice or the mastermind. So I believe that she would put ideas into Taz's head and Taz would act on it. So Jazz was like the brain and Taz was like the muscle. Now, Nikki didn't know that she was pregnant with twins because Taz was situated in front of Jazz. That says a lot, especially when you take these 2 cards into account. So again, Taz was the Ace of Wands. She being the aggressor. She was the one that was more outspoken and more cantankerous. And Jazz was the conformist. She would do whatever Taz told her to do, or she would follow Taz's lead. Taz was the leader. But like I said, I feel that Jazz, because of this Hierophant, she was the voice. She was the one saying, you know, she was the one basically adding the fuel to Taz's fire. And I believe she was the mastermind, which makes a lot of sense because going back to what she said, this came from Jazz, the passive one. If I have to go live with you again, I'm going to kill you. And that mole right there, I think that says a lot too, of just about, you know, who was really the one, who was the brains behind the whole operation. But Taz, she was just, and if you look at the 2, Taz is on the right, Jazz is on the left. Taz looks more physical. where Jazz looks more cerebral. She looks like she's more the Gemini component of the lunar axis, and Taz looks more like the Sagittarius. Like Taz looks like she could really like put a hurting on somebody without any provocation. But this is the brain power of the whole operation, of the whole twin unit. And let's do Nikki's significator. Now, when you look at Nikki, Nikki didn't look like she was a docile creature either. And if you know anything about Aries, you know that Aries is not a docile sign. Aries can be very aggressive. Aries is a fighter. And Aries can be very self-absorbed, very selfish, very egocentric, very egotistical. So I'm seeing all that in Nikki's face. Now, Nikki's significator card is the Two of Wands, which is very telling. That corresponds to Mars and Aries. So that Two of Wands is like, I want to do what I want to do when I want to do it. And I don't want nobody to tell me otherwise. So that's her basically, like, when she wanted to party, she partied. When she wanted to be a mother, she tried to be a role of a mother. But that Two of Wands is like, I'm always looking for thrills. It's a thrill seeker type of card. It's like where, you can never get enough. You always want something more. You're never satisfied with what you have. You're always looking for more excitement, more action. So that explains why she had the two boyfriends, because one was never enough. That South Node in Gemini points to the two boyfriends as well. And also that Two of Wands is just, it can make her very restless. It can make her basically like, I'm going to use people to my own advantage, because at the end of the day, I'm trying to come out on top, which is very Mars and Aries. So that says a lot. It's very telling. Let me know what you think in the comments section. This is a very tragic story, but as you can see, and I hope I made things clear, that this was definitely a karmic debt that Nikki Whitehead had to pay back, and it came in the form of her twins. So it was almost like she just brought about her own karma. It was almost like, to me, the way I'm looking at it is, and have read that, some souls will do this, where they will make an agreement with the universe prior to them being reincarnated and say that, look, I want to pay back a lot of my karmic debt in one lump sum. I want to get it over with so that the next lifetime I can, be at a higher station or whatever. I feel like because of the charts, especially when you put the two together and when you take into account that the nodal axis is the exact same as the twins, I feel like she chose this like on purpose to pay down a lot of karmic debt. And as weird as it sounds, it just seems like basically those twins were just a manifestation of her subconscious coming out and basically being the reaper, the grim reaper, for the karmic seeds that she sowed in past lifetimes. And I believe that explains why she kept on fighting for custody for those. Of course, it was subconscious. She didn't want to die on a conscious level. And South Node in Gemini, Gemini does deal with the conscious mind. So when you have South Node in Gemini, it can produce mental issues. It can produce situations where your conscious mind is not operating as it should. So subconsciously, it was like she kept on inviting the drama back, kept on inviting the conflict back through her twins, because she knew that ultimately it was going to lead to her death. Of course, we're talking about subconsciously. It would lead to her death ultimately. And basically that was how she was paying back that karmic debt incurred from past lives. So if you don't believe in past lives and reincarnation, maybe this astrological case study would convince you more. It may make some people a believer who were skeptical before about karma and reincarnation. I definitely believe in karma and reincarnation. And I believe that this story involving Nikki Whitehead and her twins, Jasmiyah and Tasmiyah, is a perfect example of karmic debt as well as reincarnation. So let me know what you think in the comments section. And if you would like a reading, you could go to my website at rabina.com. Stay tuned. I'm going to be during the Ace of Cups radio show episode tonight. So just tune in for that. You could go to the Cosmic Council Radio Network and then just click Ace of Cups. It's going to be the first show that you see. Peace and many blessings.